any longer with the news that we have today. I'm going to lead off with a helicopter going over my head. From the top, or do you want to take it?
Could you identify yourself? I'm
sorry. Thank you all for coming. My name is Lance Rogers, one of the founding members of the Citizens Against Sewage. We felt this issue was very timely and had to be done today due to the time-critical nature of President Trump coming to the river valley to look at the Border Patrol wall installations, and it's a good time to address this issue on a national scale. Just before I lead into the people that will be joining us today, I'd like to give you a little bit of background and numbers just in today from testing in the 1.5 million gallon spill that occurred on 3/5 of this month. So March 5th, 18, we had 1.5 million gallons go down through the river valley from another closure at Pump Station Silo on the Mexican side. Testing is just in from the public utilities at San Diego, provided to IBWC. The total coliforms were 98,000, E. coli 201,000, Enterococcus 21,870. To put that in perspective, the daily limits for total coliform are 10,000, and that's 98 times the daily limit. E. coli is 400 is the daily limit. It's 503 times the daily limit. And Enterococcus daily limit is 104. That's 210 times the daily limit. So that gives you an idea of what's sitting in the river valley every time there's a spill that doesn't get washed out to sea. And more importantly, I'd like to introduce a former Border Patrol agent, an extremely brave man that is the only person that we've been able to find to come forward. I've spoken to multiple military, both active duty and retired, that had similar stories to tell but would not come forward. And this gentleman is extremely brave and is willing to come forward to tell his story of his experience of the pollution and the potential dangers of working in the pollution, both in the ocean and the river valley. So I'd like to introduce Joshua Willey, former Border Patrol agent, and I'd like to have him come and tell the story.
Thank you. Yeah, as he said, my name is Joshua Willey. I grew up here in the South Bay and Chula Vista, Bonita, Imperial Beach. Ever since I was a little kid, I've played and surfed in the waters right here off of Imperial Beach and Coronado. Unfortunately, for as far back as I can remember, staph infections, ear infections, sinus infections, stomach problems have always been common and almost expected by people that surf and go in the water here on a regular basis. I was a Border Patrol agent from 2003 to 2013. The first 3 years I spent in El Centro, California, and I'm not going to get into that area too much today because we're here, but I did work in and around, or not in, thank God, but around the New River, which is another extremely polluted river that flows from Mexico into the United States. Let's see. In 2006, I got transferred here to San Diego, and as a Border Patrol agent, EMT, emergency medical technician, was sort of a collateral duty that I did. And because I enjoy helping people, I worked really hard to get accepted for the selection process with the Border Patrol Search, Trauma, and Rescue Team that happened to be held at Coronado, on base in Coronado. That was in April 2010. We were on the clock 24/7, so we were housed in barracks there. It was a pretty physically intense academy, they call it, or selection process. The selection process on a daily basis included getting in and out of the ocean, as well as a lot of other ground PT in the sand that runs along the shoreline all up and down the coast of Coronado. On about the 8th or 9th day of this 30-day academy, there was a pretty heavy rain And, you know, we didn't take the day off. We trained right through it. We were in and out of the ocean, and during the rain and then after. So on about day 10, which is a couple days later, I started having really intense pain in my armpit on my left arm, and I sort of thought it was an overuse injury at that time, maybe you know, from the rigorous PT we were doing. But so I ignored it. You know, this type of training is designed to weed people out, and I didn't want to quit, so I just, you know, chalked it up as an overuse injury. So on day 11, the pain got worse, and it started spreading down into my arm and then up into my neck and down into my chest area. And again, I didn't want to quit, so I just powered through it, made it through the day. And then that night, I woke up in the barracks with, you know, confused. I had night sweats, I had the shakes, and it didn't feel right, you know. So then I started thinking maybe this isn't just an overuse injury. The next day, I got up and I could no longer perform like I needed to at that level. So I was sent home. I left Coronado with extreme pain in my arm to where I wasn't able to lift it, and it was again radiating up into my neck and down into my chest. So I was sent home, and I went straight to bed thinking I'd just sleep it off. I woke up later that night, and I needed to, you know, go to the restroom. And next thing I knew, I woke up on the floor of the bathroom. I had a febrile seizure due to a high fever that I was having at the time. So I was transported by ambulance to Grossmont Hospital, and once there, I just remember my arm was extremely swollen, like I want to say the size of a volleyball maybe, and the skin was stretched to the point where it was shiny, and it seemed like it was going to pop and burst. I was told, my family and I both were told by the doctors that I may have to have my arm amputated, and that was just, it was hard to hear for both my family and myself. I had emergency surgery to relieve the pressure in my arm, and a battery of blood tests that eventually figured out that what I had was type A strep. It's a necrotizing fasciitis. It's flesh-eating bacteria is what it is. And I was in the hospital there. Once that was diagnosed, I was in the hospital for 14 days. While I was there, I had another surgery to relieve the pressure. So I have a scar about this long here, and then another one here because it needed to, you know, leave my body and relieve the pressure. Again, I was in the hospital for those 14 days, and I was just pumped full of heavy-duty antibiotics and really heavy-duty pain medications from, you know, morphine, Dilaudid, OxyContin, all those sort of things. I even had to... daily I had to go into a hyperbaric chamber where they would, you know, saturate my body with oxygen in order to promote the healing process. So that was pretty interesting. So, you know, the physical pain of this ordeal that I went through eventually went away, but the negative impact that it's had on myself and my family has been much worse. I mean, pain goes away, but it still really bums me out, you know. And to this day, I'm a surfer. A lot of my friends surf here still. I haven't surfed here since I got sick. I live in Oceanside now, and I just refuse to come down here because I just continuously hear of buddies and people, you know, getting sick with staph infections and all those other things I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so, you know, that's basically all I have. I want to say thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Joshua.
For sure.
Really appreciate it. And one thing before I turn it over to Christopher Harris from Border Patrol is that this exemplifies the after effects for all military, all men and women of service, is that the potential for PTSD is very real. And that's a story for another time, but obviously that is the negative effect of once you lose your mission in life, PTSD is usually the next one to follow. Christopher Harris from Border Patrol, who will speak next to dovetail on to Joshua's story, and then I'll speak, and then former Congressman Bilbray will also speak, and then Daron will speak. So please.
I appreciate everybody being here today. My name is Chris Harris. I am the Director of Legislative and Political Affairs for Local 1613 National Border Patrol Council. I'm also an elected secretary. So I don't speak for the Border Patrol. I speak for the local, and we represent the men and the women of the Border Patrol in the San Diego sector, and it encompasses 5 counties in San Diego. This is a problem we've been dealing with now for 40 years. It's just getting worse. One of the things we see is our agents getting sick, getting injured. We have 82 or 83 at my own station alone who have been contaminated, chemical burns, rashes, burns to their throats and lungs from methane and hydrogen sulfide. And it's getting worse. The spills are happening more and more. The flows are coming in, not just through the river, but through the canyons, Yogurt Canyon, Goat Canyon, Smuggler's Gulch. Our guys are getting contaminated by this and getting ill on a constant basis. And it affects everybody that lives down here, everybody that recreates down here, everybody that traverses through there. So I appreciate being invited today at this press conference. And what I like about this is I have the big tent theory on this problem, is that everybody's welcome to pitch in and help fix this problem. I don't care if you come to me and say, Chris, I don't like La Migra, but I want to save the least turn. Welcome to the tent. I don't care if you come to me and a crotchety old man and you say, I hate people, but I want to save the environment. Welcome to our tent. So this is not a bipartisan, this is a nonpartisan issue. So I appreciate everybody that's finally pulling together, that's trying to get this solved. Not just mitigated, but resolved. So one of the issues I'm going to talk about a little bit today real quickly is we have the IBWC. That's the International Boundary and Water Commission. Their job, their purview, if you read their charter, if you read the treaty of 1944, if you read the minutes, their job in life is to probably stop this. And they have been woefully, I'll say, negligent in doing so. There is now a lawsuit against them because of that. I was asked a few months ago or several months ago by higher-ups in the U.S. government what I thought of the commissioner. And I said, well, and they said, well, Chris, do you think he needs to go? And I said, I don't know enough now. I will tell you this. I've met Commissioner Tresina. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a personable man. But, yeah, I'm starting to say I think he needs to go. He's a presidential appointee, and I think it's time for a new appointee. Under several years under his leadership, his stewardship, IBWC has done really nothing on this. They've done minutes. They have frameworks. None of that has actually addressed the problem and moved toward resolving it. So as Harry S. Truman famously once said, the buck stops here. Well, he's the commissioner of this agency, so the buck stops with him. So if we want to shake up this agency and get them to renew, I think they've forgotten along the way that their job is to protect the United States, the best interests, and the people therein. I think they've lost sight of that. So how do you change that? You change the commissioner. You change the leadership. So unfortunately, I feel that I'm constrained now to say that I think it's time for new leadership in IBWC. I continually call for the EPA to step up their game. We are seeing some movement on that. There seems to be a little back and forth between EPA and IBWC. Right now, my agency, Customs and Border Protection, is taking the lead. And I'm very proud of my agency for doing that. But make no mistake, Customs and Border Protection is a law enforcement and customs agency. We're the ones doing the testing now. We're looking for metal, heavy metals, and chemicals. But the problem with that is that's not our job. We're not overloaded with researchers, engineers, scientists, and doctors. So we're stepping forward now because nobody else has. But my analogy on that is if you had a city with a big sewer main break and was pumping sewage down the streets for days on end, and the police department said, all right, we'll step in and do what we can. Okay, great. But where's your sewer department? Where's your sanitation department? Shame on them. So CBP has stepped up to the plate. I appreciate my agency doing that. I'm labor. I don't always agree with my agency. They've stepped up on this, but we need more from the IBWC, EPA, and the governor of California. I want to know where the governor is now. Governor Brown, he's very much an environmentalist. The Kyoto protocols, fracking, all that, he says that's a state issue. God bless. But when sewage flows into this state, when chemicals flow into this state, the governor says, oh, that's a federal issue. Enough's enough. The governor needs to step up to the plate, EPA and IBWC, because this is unacceptable. And I'll end it with this. My men and women that I represent, we accept the dangers inherent in law enforcement. We don't like them, but we accept them. That's being shot at, having rocks and bottles. I've been hit in the head with a bottle. I've been shot at. We accept that. We mitigate it to the best of our ability. We wear vests. We do all that stuff. But we're no longer willing to work in a toxic chemical dump. That is not one of the inherent dangers of our job, nor it should be. If you were a teacher in a school and there were chemicals flowing in your classroom, you would expect that to be fixed. And we expect it to be fixed because it's not fair to have this happen to my men and women. And so what I'm doing is demanding that everybody come up together, put pressure on our electeds, and get this fixed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christopher. I'd like to follow on with that, and I've spent a year on this issue from every angle possible. From the spill in February of last year, that was 256 million gallons. The first person I met with was that man right there, Christopher Harris from Border Patrol. I went down there with my background in environmental, and I said, what can I do to help? What can I do to warn your agents of what they're working in now? So there is always a choke point in any problem in any business. As a business owner, you have to mitigate those problems. The choke point consistently has been Ed Racina, Commissioner of IBWC. So after working with them, trying to push them, prod them, beg them to move forward with an action plan, and hearing that everything is a stepping stone, everything is a minute order. He was here recently, right here at this offices. I asked him point blank, Mr. Racina, why haven't you declared a treaty violation by Mexico under the 1944 treaty or the minute orders 283 or 320? He actually had the gall in that meeting to say Mexico has not violated the treaty. Clearly, if the head of an agency or commissioner of an agency believes that to be true, when those minute orders are clear and indisputable, that there have in fact been violations of the treaties, multiple, if not hundreds of times, then he has to go. So I stand here before you to ask that the powers to be, which would be the President of the United States, reassign or fire Commissioner Ed Racina. You cannot fix the problem until you cut the head off the snake. Unfortunately, if this is the leadership role he has assumed, and his lack of leadership and lack of boots on the ground to fix this problem, he has to go. Now, he is inherited by Mr. Trump from a previous administration. He's been on the job 7 years now. So this is not a partisan issue. I'm not trying to make it a partisan issue, but enough is enough. This is our land. This is where we take our children to the beach, where we take our families to the beach. This is where we visit the estuary. And 60 years, I think, of stepping stones without any verifiable or any provable action is enough. With that, I'll turn things over to Congressman Bilbray.
Thank you. Thank you. Brian Bilbray, Mayor of Imperial Beach from 1978 to 1985. And I'd like to welcome you to my playground. This is where I grew up. I grew up a block from here and surfed 2 blocks from here. So this is near and dear to a lot of people. And sadly, I just left my granddaughter, who's about a year and a half, and she's a second-generation sewage kid. That 3 generations have had to face off with this, while an IBWC commissioner will say, Mexico's fulfilled everything, there's nothing I can do. Well, first of all, let me point out that this is not a new problem that just came up. It was kept quiet for a long time. If you go back and look at the San Diego County records, the increased flows and the closures of our beaches started in December of 2014. 2015, you had almost 5 times more closures than we did the year before. Nobody said anything. The commissioner did not even admit and didn't bring up, we got a problem, we need to work. Totally ignored it. That kind of clandestine kind of representation doesn't work in this country. Now, I have to say, frankly, that the commissioner says that Mexico has fulfilled all their obligations. Well, Commissioner, I was there in 1985 in Mexico City when we negotiated and sat down. I was there when Ambassador Gavin said that America was going to veto the water importation of Colorado water if Mexico could not prove and show and perform and making sure that water didn't return to the United States as pollution. I was there, Mr. Commissioner. I know what was agreed on at that time. We agreed to build the plant. We agreed to be able to take an outfall. We did our part, Mr. Commissioner. Mexico's agreement and that deal, which was attacked, I want you to know. Many people resented that Americans were spending American money on American soil to treat a foreign country's sewage. But we did that. Mexico's commitment was to build the infrastructure to catch the sewage to where it could be handled and treated. That was their deal. The renegade flows were supposed to be history, their side of the deal. We built ours. That's what the commissioner is not telling, not saying. Some of us that have been around long enough to remember these promises, remember these agreements, and to have to live with the repercussions of them not being kept up is really frustrating. Now, I got to tell you one thing. The president's got a chance to hear the local community cry about the fact that it's time to appoint a new commissioner. And hopefully when he comes next week, he'll be able to hear that from our community. He's going to be looking at issues of the fence. And speaking of the fence, I am so excited to hear the governor and the attorney of California, who have told us for decades that the border environment is not their issue. The border environment has not their jurisdiction. I'm so great to see them willing to go to court and sue the federal government over the environment of the border. I'd just like them to recognize that they may have concerns about building a fence, but why don't they look at the existing health threat that almost killed this man? And I assure you, and every one of you know, when there is a fatality, all hell is going to break loose, and all the people in Sacramento and Washington are going to be falling over themselves to say, I'm doing something. Well, now's the time to cover your tail, Mr. Governor. Mr. State Attorney, you want to be able to avoid an embarrassing, if not humiliating situation, and for rightfully so, of somebody dying because you said it wasn't your department. You've said that building of a fence on the border is your department and it's an environmental concern in the state of California. I ask you to take the same actions against the pollution that almost killed this man and has threatened the children of Imperial Beach in the South Bay for decades. Take the same action to protect people from an existing threat, a health threat, that you're willing to do against a wall. That's all I'm asking. Little equity, a little equal protection. Because this community has had their 14th Amendment's rights, equal protection, violated for way too long. And so I have to say, as far as I remember, the laws of the United States and California apply in Imperial Beach and in Coronado, Chula Vista, and in South San Diego, the same as it does anywhere else in the country. But if this pollution was being created by an American company on American soil, the feds and the state would be falling over themselves to come after and get it taken care of. I want to make sure that little girl that's waiting at home, that granddaughter, doesn't have to stand up here and say, my grandpa warned you about this. So I think that, seriously, guys, where else can you do it? And I would say this to the Chamber of Commerce. You were right about pushing for recycling with Surfrider. You were right that this issue is going to affect commerce along the border. Mexico's got to wake up, and America has to wake up, that you're not going to have water constantly going to Mexico if they can't treat it. Eventually, that water is going to get cut off, and that's going to cause a crisis down south. You're not going to have people crossing the border every day, commerce and money and business going on, if you don't take care of this problem. You take care of this problem, or it's going to affect everybody, not just the children in Imperial Beach. Outside of that, I don't have an opinion on this issue.
Good afternoon. My name is Daron. I'm an attorney with Citizens Against Sewage, and I have a statement to President Donald Trump. President Trump, we need your help. We have a regional transborder sewage crisis in the South Bay of San Diego County. Mr. Trump, when you visit San Diego next week to look at border wall prototypes, please have Border Patrol give you a tour of the Tijuana River Valley, where San Diego has declared a state of emergency, where Imperial Beach has declared a state of emergency in connection with the continuous flow of toxic waste and sewage from Mexico to the United States. Mr. Trump, these sewage spills from Mexico are acts of environmental and biological terrorism. Citizens, military, and border personnel are getting sick and injured. Local estuaries and marine ecosystems are impacted. Beaches are routinely closed and local economies are adversely affected. There is a $1 billion Navy coastal campus being built 2 miles from the border. This is a matter of national security. Mr. Trump, we need your help. Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to put another thing into perspective. So IBWC is very quick to differentiate between wet weather and dry weather spills. To us, a spill is a spill. If it's a rain event, that means urban runoff, stormwater, and the closure of pump station Sela is a channeling of all these confluents into a funnel. And what comes out the other end of the funnel is pollution. The fecal indicator bacteria that is tested is constantly above limits. So they can call it potable water line breaks, they can call it urban runoff, they can call it whatever they want. But the end of the day is it's dangerous, it's hazardous, and it's deadly. So just since January 1 of this year, 1.8 billion gallons of effluent have flowed through this river valley. 1.8 billion. And it has to stop, and the time is now. Thank you all for coming.
Questions?
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 Do you think that Donald Trump will take any time or even cares about this, Congressman?
Well, I think if we can get him to Goat Canyon and show him the hole in the wall where there's a problem with the fence not being completed, we can then within the Border Patrol can show him the hazardous and the constant flow that's coming out of Goat Canyon. What we're hoping to do is be it the governor and the state or the Water Quality Control Board or the President of the United States, we're hopefully that all the focus at the border right now won't be just on immigration and the controversies there, but where there should be some outrage at both sides. Everybody should be able to agree on this, that this is an issue that has been ignored way too long, and people are going to die because of it. So hopefully we'll get him close enough, and if that's why we'd love to get him down in the valley, take him to Smuggler's Gulch and Goat Canyon and show him that flow, and hopefully we'll be able to do that.
Dan, just to follow up with that, we had done some news stories with some of the national press, and the president retweeted some of those, and that's the reason why we have action from the commissioner on down with the Customs and Border Protection. Kev McLennan took the time out to come out here and meet with the union to speak about the issue. We spent about 45 minutes discussing it. The Secretary of Homeland Security has been out here. So there is that kind of interest at the presidential level. I think our goal and our priority and the bar we need to reach is to keep him interested in this, to keep him apprised of it, so he keeps that pressure on the other agencies. Homeland Security has heard him loud and clear. Customs and Border Protection, U.S. Border Patrol has heard him loud and clear. Hopefully we can make sure that EPA has heard him loud and clear, and as we spoke about earlier, that the commissioner or new commissioner of IBWC has heard him loud and clear.
You know, a lot of negative here, but let me give a positive. I had a long discussion with the leader of an agency that has ignored this problem for way too long, and somebody I had a personal pet peeve on, and that is the one agency that's supposed to take care of water quality, state agency called the Water Quality Control Board, and they have forced Imperial Beach to spend millions on what's called non-point source. That's that stuff that comes out of the drainage system. They have forced cities to do millions down here because it's a law. But they have ignored the fact that the largest non-point source, the largest storm drain that pollutes the most, has not had one action taken by them in the last 40 years. And that is where I talked to them this week, and next month they're going to consider, and hopefully we'll be able to go, I'm going to go over and talk to them about they should be the lead agency. Cities and counties and the Port District should not be suing the feds. The agency that's responsible for clean water in Imperial Beach and the South Bay is the Water Quality Control Board. They should be the lead agency, and everybody else should be supporting them. And hopefully this coming month they will finally do the responsible thing and take the lead at addressing this issue.
Another follow-up to that is there's two bills in front of Congress right now, H.R. 3794 and H.R. 3795, co-authored by Juan Vargas and Daryl Issa, a bipartisan bill that would do exactly what we've been talking about. It would take IBWC out of being lead agency, and it would give that responsibility to Army Corps of Engineers, and then on the reporting side, it would take it away from IBWC and give it to the State Department. And we wholeheartedly support that bill, and hopefully under executive order it can happen faster, and then not have to wait to go through the normal processes, because everybody seems to be on board with it. It just has to work its way through the system. Congressman Bilbray brought up another fantastic point. San Diego Regional Water Quality Control Board, and Dave Gibson being the executive director, has at their disposal things called total maximum daily limits, or TMDLs. Those have not been instituted and should be, and they need to take a more proactive role in this situation. I was boots on the ground at the Santa Barbara oil spill. There are 1,200 people actively mitigating that oil spill. This is something that's no different than oil. It's just as dangerous to the environment and just as dangerous to the people. And we ask for the same level of response. Thank you.
Joshua, what year was your injury? And then could you tell us, are you disappointed it's taken, your thoughts on why it's that it's been years after your injury and it's still, unresolved? This is still an ongoing issue.
Well, like I mentioned before, I was born in 1977, and I've been coming to this beach since then. And I have plenty of friends that surf here on a daily basis that are much older than me, and it's been going on forever. It's just been accepted up to this point, and it's a horrible situation. My injury happened April 2010, and one thing I would share as a surfer is in the springtime, a lot of times we get storms south of us here, and it creates swell, which in turn creates current coming from the south to the north. So any amount of
Don't you
sewage.
think they should have done something in 2010, I guess, after your injury?
Absolutely. That's
You're
why I'm
still-
here.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say other than I'm doing what I can, even though it's not the most comfortable thing to do. And I hope some other people will step up and do what they can. And it seems like the ball is rolling, and I want to be part of that. I want to be part of the solution, and I appreciate everybody being here today. It means a lot to all the community. I have friends that live all in East Lake, all this whole South Bay, and this is their closest beach to enjoy, with their families, and a lot of them don't feel comfortable doing that because of all this stuff that's going on.
Did you have to leave Border Patrol because of those injuries, you said?
Well, I'm currently on federal disability retirement. This is part of the overall situation, I guess you could say, but I'm not going to get into all that today.
Absolutely not.
What is your message to President Trump?
My message to President Trump is I love what he's doing so far, and I